it's really complicated having a goal like that because there's just so much more experience you need than just being a good rock climber. And I think that's the thing that I learned throughout all of this was it's just the logistics of it, the partnership aspect, the experience with like rope systems and management in that way is a lot. And it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of patience to kind of get to that level.
Hello and welcome to the Duffle Shuffle. I'm Adrian and we're here to discuss the world of climbing and skiing in all its forms through the eyes of mountain guides.
And I'm Sam Keykeper. In each episode, we'll unpack exhilarating stories, share invaluable insights, and get up close and personal with some of the most experienced and passionate guides and athletes in the industry.
Whether you're a seasoned alpinist or a weekend warrior, the Duffle Shuffle is your ticket to the thrilling world of climbing, skiing, and mountaineering. Join us. Welcome back to the Duffle Shuffle podcast, episode 35. And I am so excited to announce that my founder co-host, Sam Keykeper, is back. How's it going, Sam?
It's going great. I had a really nice month-long vacation.
Is that what it was? Well, for those that have been watching, you know that Emily Harrington has stepped in for the last couple of news segments while Sam's been on vacation, quote unquote. And we aren't getting rid of Emily. Actually, I was just going to miss her too much. So she's our guest today on episode 35. So still part of the family. But Sam, you're calling it a vacation, but what have you been doing the past month?
Yeah, so I spent July 4th in the hospital, and then I've been recovering since then. Actually, no, my wife has been recovering. We had a child on July 3rd. Little Hank, actually big Hank, came out 9 pounds. And so I've been mostly raising a toddler by myself and then supporting my wife raising an infant.
Because you have a 2-year-old Wally? How old is Wally?
Wally is not even 2 yet. He'll be 2 at the end of this month. So yeah, we have 2 under 2 currently, and it's a little chaotic, but super fun.
Dang, you guys are in it. Well, congratulations to you and to Susie and the whole family. But, you know, for inquiring minds want to know, asking for a friend, you know, what's your impression of, you know, first month of 2 instead of 1?
I mean, it's pretty great. I think, you know, we're still in the, like, we have a pet rock and then we have a wild, almost 2-year-old. So I haven't seen the light yet, but it's pretty fun. And, you know, it's interesting, like second time around, everything is just easier. And that's not to say that it's easy, but like for my wife, labor was much easier. And with all the newborn things, like I've Googled 10% as much as I did with our first. Like you're just more confident and you understand like how to raise this little bag of skin and bones. And so yeah, it's been awesome. It's, you know, a total shift in how we're living our life. And I've been sleeping in the guest room so I can get up early with our toddler and get him out to daycare and then, you know, doing all those things. And so it's been a total shift for us, but it's great. And I wouldn't do it any differently.
That's interesting that, you know, I feel like I remember absolutely nothing of how we raised or kept Arrow alive for those first months. I've completely blacked it out. It's kind of like my Everest summit without oxygen. It is just completely blacked out. But you're saying there is some muscle memory there that actually made it vastly.
And that's correct. It's 100% muscle memory. I don't actually remember these things. I just like am more confident in figuring it out, or like I'm just less worried about little things. Like, I don't know. I think with the first one, you don't really know how durable they are yet. And with the second one, you realize that kids are actually a lot more durable. You know, even though they're only 10 pounds, they're a lot more durable than you think. And so I think there's less like uncertainty that, yeah, I don't remember what I did with the first. I don't remember what I did 2 days ago. But at the same time, like there's a lot more muscle memory and confidence with the second one.
Nice. Well, that's great to hear. And how is your, you know, we're a climbing and skiing podcast. How is your climbing and skiing fitness? And, how do you fit it in? Are you fitting it in?
Nada right now. Obviously, no skiing, and I have not been climbing at all. I've been fortunate in that I've been able to take just, the last month pretty much off of everything. I've, been sending emails here and there, but nothing really more than that. So that's been nice. I've been really able to focus on the family. And I've been out on one mountain bike ride. And I crashed pretty hard and busted my thumb. So, fitness isn't necessarily there, but I'm doing a lot of caring of children, and I think that keeps you somewhat fit.
And do you miss mountain guiding when you're not doing it?
It's interesting. I haven't really this time around, but I think the reality is I'm just so focused on like what I've got going on in the next 4 hours that I haven't really had the time to like think about what I'm missing or what I'm not doing. It's more of just like, this is where I'm at right now. And so, I really like the fact that like really nothing matters except for my family right now. And that's refreshing. I think we get so caught up in the world that we live in and, the rat race. And I think having some time to like really just focus on one thing, and that being my family, is really cool and refreshing.
Awesome. Yeah, we've certainly missed you and your energy at Alpenglow and leadership with the guide team. But I think that is a really rad thing to like recognize that you've been able to create for yourself, that you were able to take a beat, take a window, and put all your focus into your family. It's pretty special.
It's super special, and it's a luxury to have that, ability to take some time away from work. And I just feel fortunate to be able to do that.
Well, thanks for taking the time with us today to work on the Duffle Shuffle. Here we are.
Absolutely. We had a great interview with your wife, Emily Harrington. But first, what do you have for news?
The news is so fun. Maybe we need this to be a weekly podcast instead of an every 2-week podcast, because I always have more than I get to talk to. I was prepping. I was sure coming into recording today, we planned to record today a few days ago. And I was like, I'm definitely talking about K2 and the hard season in Pakistan and all this failure and what's going to happen these last few days. And as it turns out, I'm like, I want to push that, because in the past, 24, 48 hours, I've seen just interesting news pop up that I think big picture, what it reminded me is like in a lot of the sports we follow, the spring and the fall are the big like seasons for potentially huge expeditions in the Himalaya, for the best rock climbing conditions in the Northern Hemisphere, in the US and Europe, for skiing, a lot of big mountains. And so like August rolls around and it's time we start hearing about what big projects are coming up this fall. And 2 were announced in the past few days, and I just got psyched. I think it's interesting, number one, like as our world shifts a little bit, back in the day when I was being raised as a young climber, there was so much about like, and ultimately I think it's bullshit, but like so much about like, you don't talk about what you're gonna do. You only talk about like once you finish, then you can talk about your accomplishment. Don't spray, all that stuff. And I really actually, everyone should approach their objectives however they want. But from a pro climber perspective, like I think it's often harder to put your goals out in advance with the risk of failure, with the doubters, with like all the hard work and pain and suffering that goes into a project, and being willing to show that in real time instead of waiting until you can kind of put together the story and tell it afterwards in a, like we used to in a slideshow or a magazine article. I think there's a lot to be said for putting yourself out there and going on that ride with your followers or people you inspire or whatever the mainstream is to you. So 2 projects that were just announced in this like early format. The first, Tyler Andrews, who we've had on the podcast. Do you remember the episode number, Sam?
No.
You did before you had a second kid.
Yeah,
you knew all the episode numbers.
I honestly couldn't even tell you if he was in the teens or the 20s.
Well, we'll throw it in the show notes if we remember. But Tyler Andrews, who, kind of made a splash in the mountaineering world as a runner coming in and trying to set FKTs, or fastest known times. He was on Everest this spring, attempted to break the fastest known time on the south side of Everest, and ultimately failed. He just announced he's going to go back this autumn and try to set the FKT. Loads of wild things about that. The autumn tends to be a much more challenging season with lower success rates, more out of your control in terms of weather, and also more out of your control in terms of fewer teams on the mountain, which sounds like an advantage to a speed climber, but can also be a disadvantage because of there being less power to fix ropes, to break trail, to have a safety net around you if things go wrong. And Tyler is very much on the running end of the spectrum of people trying to set FKTs in the mountains versus highly experienced climber with decades of experience. And so I think that puts him in an interesting place, being on the mountain with fewer climbers, potentially less support, and in a more difficult decision-making environment. So that's not shade. Like, I'm so excited that Tyler's like, I want to try it. This might be a better season with fewer people there. And also, I just think he just can't wait to try again. And his fitness, he thinks, is there. So that's an exciting one. Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I saw that story the other day, and my first thought was like, post-monsoon in the Himalaya is a ski season, and that means more snow. And then post-monsoon on Everest is not the busy season, which means no track or less track packed in. And I'm surprised in that it seems hard to move fast when you've only had 20 or so climbers moving up the mountain versus hundreds, if not thousands, on a single track. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it'd be interesting to see. I hope that he finds success. And I certainly think that Tyler is an individual that can like kind of destroy the existing record if everything lines up for him. I think that from a physical standpoint, he has the ability to like really like take hours off the time, not minutes or seconds. That said, I think that if you had identical days and one was in the spring and one was in the fall, he's going to be faster in the spring, almost definitely. And so kind of an interesting one to like, maybe this is just his start of trying to lower that time on Everest and he'll go back in a spring season in the future.
Maybe we'll see. I mean, I the only reason I wouldn't agree with you is in the fall, the autumn also has great stable periods where the snowpack is stable and wind hammered. And if he gets, smooth wind hammer that he's staying on top of instead of breaking through to his knees kind of thing, it doesn't take all those people. It does take a concerted effort, but although I know no details, like I guarantee there must be a team going to the south side this fall, a team of climbers, whether they're other no oxygen climbers supported by one of the Nepali operators or whether there's one commercial team going. This is going to be power on the mountain, or this just wouldn't work financially. It's so expensive. And so the conditions could align. I think what we know from many decades on the mountain and watching the mountain is they align less frequently. And that's just got to be accepted. But the other part I love about this project is like, people ask what to do about the south side of the mountain and how many people in the inexperience and all these things. One of the things to do is to encourage more people to climb in the autumn. The autumn, while there is a lower success rate for the loads of climbers out there who have lots of experience, really want to get away from the south side shit show, want their experience to be less affected by other climbers, and are willing to work harder and accept a lower overall rate of success. The autumn is awesome. And Jim Morrison and Hillary proved that when they did Lhotse, same route, the whole thing is totally possible in the right season to have a great season up there, not being affected by other climbers. So instead of belly aching about the mountain being too busy, I think a lot of experienced climbers should be looking at the autumn and putting themselves out there. And that's exactly what Tyler is doing. And so more exposure for Southside autumn expeditions on Everest is just a great thing.
Awesome. Yeah, I like it. So who's your other athlete?
Yeah, I'll go quicker on the second one, so our news doesn't take an hour. So second one, Kilian Jornet just announced his next project, and it looks very similar to his Alps project, where he wanted to climb all the 4,000 meter peaks in the Alps and use only human powered travel in between. So walking or running or cycling. And doing it very fast. I think he did it in like 19 days, barely slept, all the 4,000 meter peaks in the Alps. He, I think, crowdsourced the idea of what to do next. And what came together was trying to do a similar thing in the lower 48 states of the United States, to climb all the 14,000 foot peaks in the lower 48, traveling only by human power, bike or foot between the peaks. He's going to start this September. I don't know how many, there must be, gosh,
60
how many peaks are
something.
there? 60 something
So
peaks?
I know there's like 53 to 58, depending on how you categorize them, in Colorado. And
Yep.
then I think there's 14 in California and Rainier.
And Rainier.
I think that would be it.
Is that everything? There's nothing in Oregon? Yeah, I think you're right. So high 60s.
Yep.
And there's a lot, we're not Europe. There's a lot of space between those peaks. And so, I mean, everything about this I just love, right? Like, as a friend who's hung out on the mountains with Kilian, I just really enjoy him. As a leader in our sports, inspiring people, he's reached deeply into the mainstream. That's exciting to me. Show it, he's a dad, I think, of 3 kids. He's showing it's still possible with enough resources and a great partner and support network, and some of the things we're going to talk about with Emily today. It's possible to keep doing unique things. And I also think, like, it's very clearly showing an objective that's like taking away maybe some of the risk he's chosen to take in the bigger mountains of the world in some of his past projects, like no oxygen on Everest FKTs, and shifting to something that's going to take a massive physical effort and put his body and brain into a pain cave that's hard to imagine, while perhaps reducing some of that risk profile a bit. These peaks are certainly not to be trifled with, especially in September. 14ers can be very serious, but there's no way you could say they're the same as a new route or skiing or no oxygen in the Himalaya. And so while I haven't spoken to him, I don't know all his reasons for choosing this. I think it's just fucking rad, and I can't wait to see it. And I bet it's a project where a lot of people can see him in real life as well as following along on social media. I just love everything about it.
Yeah, I agree. I think one thing that I've always admired about Kilian is it seems like he authentically just loves to be in the mountains. And like you said, it doesn't matter if he's on Everest or climbing, in his backyard or running or whatever. He just has a passion. I mean, I would say he doesn't even have just a passion for the mountains. He has just a passion for being outside. And it just seems like he really loves it. And so, yeah, cool to see him coming back. He noted that coming out for Western states kind of like ignited this fire for doing some adventure in the lower 48 and in the Sierra. Particularly. And, it was cool to see, I don't know if you followed his Western States run this year. He got 3rd in the race, a race that I believe he won in 2011. Ran much, much faster, but the field was quite competitive and he wasn't able to win it. And I was just so curious, like, is that hard for a accomplished athlete like Kilian to, lower your personal record by almost an hour, yet
and still get beaten.
Win a race? Yeah.
I mean, hopefully, as an aging athlete, like, I think hopefully there's just so much joy and pride in that. Like, one reason that has happened, that the field has gotten so much stronger, is what Kilian and others before him and in his peer group did at those times to raise the profile of the sport, to get young people who are uber talented and potentially have, higher level coaching, high level nutrition, high level equipment, all these things we've talked about that are changing the sport. Those things probably would not have happened without Kilian doing what he did in the 20 zeros.
Absolutely.
And how rad is that to be able to look at that and know that you had your thumbprint, your fingerprint is on that progression?
Absolutely. And then it made me wonder, like, these 2 gentlemen that beat Kilian, are they more proud of podiuming at Western or beating Kilian Jornet?
Totally. But both probably. The last thing I'll say about these projects, like, I think this is, it's easy in our worlds, and you just spoke about, kind of taking a month off a lot of your work and things like that. But like, we talk a lot of shit in our industry and our sports about technology. But one of the cool things about technology is how much easier it's becoming to tell the stories in real time of these attempts. And while I don't know the media plans of Tyler's or Kilian's, generally their stories are told in real time. And that is something that I am so passionate about and believe so strongly in. That's why I pushed, satellite Wi-Fi in the Himalaya for so many years. That's why I pushed things like Snapchatting Everest, and like tech today between Starlink and our phones is allowing for really high quality real-time storytelling from these attempts. And so I think it's going to be exciting this fall as I'm busy like bang my head against a wall trying to climb another 513 or whatever my project is to get to watch these.
Well, maybe we can trade Killian a bed for a podcast episode as he runs from Shasta down to the Eastern Sierra or vice versa.
I'll keep dropping into his DMs and try to get him on. It would be great to have him here. Sam, what's your news?
Well, it's funny, I spend a lot of time holding a baby, rocking in a rocking chair, scrolling Instagram, and I don't have like a ton, but there was one story that really caught my eye, and I'm not trying to criticize these individuals, but I thought it was interesting. There's a peak in the Cordillera Huayhuash in Peru called Girishanka, and it's a very, very well-known alpine peak. It's got super diverse climbing from vertical limestone rock climbing to ice climbing to like wallowy snow climbing. And it's kind of one of the more known alpine peaks out there. And some individuals from Europe, Danny Arnold and Alex Huber and Simon Gelt, just put up a new route. That alone isn't my news story. I think what's interesting is they are claiming a new route, but they didn't summit the peak. And apparently the story goes, they climbed the hard climbing, the new route climbing, and they joined in with what is like the summit final few pitches to the true summit. And almost all of the routes continue on this same path up to the very top. And so their new route is a new line to get to that point. That point is kind of just like a flat spot before this final summit push. And they're calling it the East Summit. Although it's not like a peak that has like, a summit here and a summit here. It's like a flat spot on this ridge line. And they set out to climb and they acknowledged that they wanted to summit this peak. And now they're claiming a new route, having not summited the peak and summited the East Summit. And so it's a little bit of an interesting one. Did they set a new route up into this common point? Absolutely. I'm not trying to take that away from them. But like their goal was to summit Girishanka with a new route, and they didn't summit Girishanka with a new route. They put up a new route, and it's kind of interesting. And I'm curious what your thoughts are. Obviously, I think you're not following this story as much as I did because I've had time to, do a little bit of research. But is it a new route if you don't summit when your original goal was to summit?
Fascinating.
And actually, I got one more point to add before I get your thoughts on it.
Go for it.
So they said that the final pitches to the true summit were too dangerous and difficult with the equipment that they had. And all previous climbers have brought the necessary equipment to do that successful bit of the climbing. So it's not like they had like, a chill 5/8 scramble to get to the top and they just decided not to go there. Like there was difficult climbing above them that they felt was too dangerous to continue on.
Wow. I feel like I'm in the hot seat here giving an opinion. And this is the very first I'm hearing about this story. So I guess my summer road trip to the woods of Idaho to go rock climbing has been successful because I've been off my phone and not enough.
There you go.
This did not cross my radar, even though I'm sure the algorithm knows I would have loved it. So putting that out there, I have no detail, no opinions of the climbers who did this climb, claimed the new route, or other climbers who have been on the mountain before. So without the specifics, it's a little bit hard to weigh in because I do think the specifics matter. So, first and foremost, just my standard soapbox is be super honest about what you did, how you did it, and all your asterisks. So I'm making an assumption here that no one had to find this out, that they didn't go to the top or they didn't finish the climb, that they just put it right out there from the beginning. We didn't go to the top. We missed 8 pitches. I'm assuming that because I know, some of the climbers that you mentioned who did this are really well reputed and have amazing, histories and experience in this sport. Again, I don't know. So maybe we'll have a follow-up in 2 weeks. Whether it's a new route or not is really interesting. And I think ultimately probably what's happening right now and what caught your eye is exactly what should happen within the climbing community, because we don't have rules. We don't, all the discussion we've had about Everest, if Atala Andrews sets a new FKT to the summit without oxygen and then comes down on oxygen, did he set the no oxygen FKT? I have strong opinions about that, but I'm only one climber and it's going to be debated in the public sphere. And so what it sounds like is this is being debated in the public sphere right now. And as long as it's, and again, I haven't seen anything, and it's probably not, I would say as long as it's being done respectfully, and honestly, then I'm all for that debate, while also remembering that none of it fucking matters. They went out and had an adventure in the mountains, and I hope they had a good time.
And they came home safely.
But, I say none of it matters. But if you're a professional climber making money from climbing, then it is very important that we at least have these conversations. And I do think as the sport becomes bigger and bigger, some standards of what is your question, what is a new route versus a variation versus a rad climb that failed versus a summit. We do need to keep having those conversations, because I hear people all the time now claim a summit of a mountain, but they didn't go to the true summit because the cornices were too dangerous. It's that's just not a summit. It's just not. There is one highest point. It is the summit. And that sounds a little bit like this. I'm not sure they go in the right direction by being we went to the East Summit instead of we did a new route up to this point on the mountain. Because if you look at rock climbing, which is not mountaineering, but it all came from the same place. When you climb El Cap, when you do a new route on El Capitan in Yosemite, you don't go to the top of the peak. Even though there is a summit, you stop when the technical climbing ends. And what is technical climbing versus non-technical climbing is a gray area, right? It depends on your skill set of what's technical or not. And then me and Em and I have often had these conversations of what is how many pitches have to be new, how many rope lengths have to be new to be a new route versus a variation. Is it half of the route, 2/3 of the route, 3/4 of the route before it lends back in? Because if they did 2,800 feet of new climbing and there was 600 to go, I think they could definitely argue they did a new route on the face, even though they didn't complete the face of the mountain, or they did but if they only did 400 feet of new climbing and then came into the thing, then they probably didn't do a new route. They did a variation. But neither of those is answering your question of can you do a new route without getting, I guess, what you're saying, to the top of the technical difficulties or to the summit. It's very gray.
All right. So we're going to get you to do some research and we'll get your opinion next week. I think where I'm landing is that, I liked your El Cap comparison, because you can climb a route on El Cap and not go to the true top of El Cap. And that's because it's not where the technical climbing is. Yet these guys stopped because the climbing was too technical for them or the equipment they had. And so my first thought is well, you can't claim that you climbed a route if you only climbed half of it because you didn't bring the gear for the top bit, right? Because if you had brought the right gear, maybe you wouldn't been able to climb the bottom bit. Climbing technical vertical limestone with all of your, winter gear on your back is much harder than if you left the winter gear behind. And so there's a factor there. And then the other bit is they acknowledge that their goal was to summit the mountain, and then they didn't, but they're still claiming a new route. And so my thought is well, if you're going to claim a new route, you have to make the goal just to get to this point that you feel is the top of the route. And if your goal was to make it to the top of the route, if the goal of the new route was to be the top of the mountain, and then you change the goal during the climb, is it really a new route?
Yeah,
or is it a failed attempt and you should be going back?
It's a very reasonable question. I think I even remember from Janu these conversations. I think we talked about when Jackson Marvel and Team summited, they basically got frostbite by finishing their new route and still going to the summit. And had they only climbed their new route, but not gone to the summit,
They might not have lost digits.
right. But to them, it was important enough that they
Yeah.
needed to complete the climb. So these are great questions. I think
Just a little pot stirring, you know?
yeah, and then take it all the way to the other end, though. When you put up a new route rock climbing, single pitch, multi-pitch, you often don't go to the top of the wall. And you often don't know, to your point, you don't know where the end of the route's going to be until you get up there and you see the quality and is it
Fair.
worth continuing up to this worse rock. So those are all examples of why a route might be a route without like completion. But in general, I do think there's a lot of differentiation within mountains, or there has been, that you're going to the top. The one caveat I'd say is like the sport is changing as so many more of the logical firsts have been done. And so I do think we are going to see more firsts in the world of alpinism that don't necessarily go to a summit. But I still think, to your point, it sounds to me
You got to claim that before.
yeah, exactly. Like I only want to do a route on this face and I'm going to stop at the top of this face. And I don't know whether it's before or after. I think it's just like, and I'm guessing this is where these guys are coming from. I'm guessing they're really, really proud of what they accomplished. And so the best way to describe that was a successful new route without a summit versus an unsuccessful attempt on a new route. Because I'm guessing they're like, what we did was really, really spectacular. And I don't think
And it was. And
you're
it
not trying to take
absolutely
away
was.
from that.
Absolutely
Right?
not.
So, my guess would be they had an unsuccess. If I was put on the spot today, I think they probably had an unsuccessful attempt at completing a new route, but did however many thousands of feet of rad new climbing that suddenly hope someone can repeat and take, if not to the summit, to the top of the technical climbing. I do
Absolutely.
like the idea that in the alpine world, we should complete the technical climbing. And we
Yep.
can argue about what that is, but it sounds like this certainly wasn't that.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll send you some articles to read on,
Yeah.
and we can circle back on it in 2 weeks and get a fresh opinion.
Yeah. Wow. Pot stirring. Love it. I can't wait to read more. Thanks for bringing some news that I hadn't heard about.
Heck yeah. Awesome. Well, we have a great episode with Emily Harrington, your wife, coming up next. She talks about her film Girl Climber, which will be premiering in IMAX theaters on August 24th. Great film. We've both seen it a few times and really enjoyed it. So be sure to check it out and stay tuned for the episode with Emily.
It's a fun one, close to my heart.
Welcome back to episode 35 of the Duffle Shuffle podcast. We are back. We've got Emily. Emily, welcome back to the Duffle Shuffle.
Thanks for having me. 35.
I feel like we should be welcoming you back to the Duffle Shuffle, Sam.
So for those that haven't listened to the last few episodes, Emily has been stepping in for me while I was on a little bit of a vacation from recording. So Emily has been recording news with Adrian, and now we have you on as a guest.
That's right. Here I am. News was fun.
You enjoyed it?
I did enjoy it. It was fun. I got to talk about climbing competitions, which I always love doing. So
We probably should have you on as a guest news, a guest news person frequently, because you're like the climbing expert that Adrian and I come to when we're like, we need more climbing. What's the latest, greatest top story? So maybe we'll do this more often.
yeah, we should do it more often. I mean, hopefully that's a good thing. I don't know if I'm the best climbing expert out there, but
You're certainly
a climbing expert.
Yeah, you're certainly better than
one.
Adrian and
Yeah. I don't know.
Hey, speak for yourself, Keycapper.
No, I'm speaking for both of us.
So can you guest and host today? Ask yourself questions?
I could actually, because I just did a podcast about this. So I kind of have it down.
Well, we're going to talk about your film today, but that is after we hear a little bit about your guys' trip. So I see you're back home. I know the last 3-ish weeks you guys were on the road. Tell us a little bit about your climbing trip. Where'd you go and what was it like?
We went to a place called the Finns in Idaho, kind of like the middle of nowhere, Idaho. And Yeah, it is honestly one of the best like limestone walls, I'd say, in the country. It's just one sheer vertical wall. And the climbing was amazing. It was super amazing, super quiet. We really couldn't have asked for a better trip. It was awesome.
So I feel like summer climbing, especially in a state like Idaho that's rather warm, you typically don't hear of people climbing hard in the lower 48. What made that possible for you guys?
We were actually super worried that it would be too hot, but it is a bit higher. It's at like 7,500, 7,700 feet. So it's higher, obviously higher than Tahoe. And there was a fair bit of wind. So basically for me, it can be hot, but as long as there's air movement, that helps the friction a lot. And the style of climbing too, it's really crimpy. So you're grabbing on small holds. So if it's too cold, like I think you could numb out pretty easily. For me, it was honestly kind of perfect. It was like in the high 70s, low 80s, but a lot of wind.
Yeah, for us, like coming out of the trip, it was definitely like, wow, we just found like the best place in the United States for climbing in July. And I think, of course, we have to be a little careful with that because what we heard from locals afterwards, non-climbers, but locals in the area, was this was the windiest summer they remember in decades. And so the wind is what made it possible to climb. I mean, the temps were in the 90s in town at 6,000 feet. And then we were probably in the 80s or like Em said, the high 70s. But it was the wind that made it totally doable. And like Em, I thought conditions were perfect. But maybe that doesn't happen every July. It kind of ties back to like I actually was out on the lake here in Tahoe today and the water temperature was only 65, which is really cold for Tahoe in August. And it reminded me it's been a cool summer here in Tahoe. And it seems like this little bit unusual summer, a little bit cooler, a little bit windier has been happening across the West.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it has been unseasonably cool here. The Finns is not a crag that I've really heard much about. And you think about like the classic crags or climbing venues around the US and you think of, Red Rocks and Rifle and Indian Creek and, going north, Ten Sleep, Wyoming, and even into Canada, the Bugaboos. Why is the Finns not on my radar?
God, it should be.
It's really good. I think it's probably not on your radar for a couple reasons.
I'm a bad climber. That's part of it.
It is like kind of one wall. There has been more development in terms of like moderates and easier climbing, but that's newer and lesser known. The really impressive big wall, the Discovery Wall, and kind of some of the other like smaller ones. Yeah, the climbing really starts at 512. So I think that automatically filters out a lot of climbers. So it's a little bit smaller. That's one. And then, there in the past, the camping is actually above, like right next to the cliff. And the road to get up there is a pretty gnarly 4-wheel drive road that's super steep that our van actually couldn't get up. And so, word of mouth, the road is really hard to get up. And so that also limits a lot of access. We found a way by camping down low, but it's not ideal. It's hot. There's a lot of bees. It's dirty. Like there's no water. It's kind of like one of those places.
Kat loved it. She'd like to add in.
She did love it. So I think that's why it's not on your radar. It is one of the best single walls in the country, but I think, the amount of climbing and the access makes it a little more difficult.
And do you have multiple aspects? Are you able to climb throughout the day, or is there kind of a short window that you're climbing each day?
Yeah, afternoon crag only. It bakes in the sun, all the walls. There is a bunch of development happening there, and I think the local community is really excited. They've developed a whole nother section with over 100 moderate routes. So I think what I mentioned about it being quite hard, like they're really trying to shift that impression and also reality. But all the walls face in this easterly direction, so morning sun, afternoon shade. But yeah, it's interesting what Em was saying about kind of like the vibe out there about the place. Like I've obviously known about this wall for a long, long time, and I've been literally begging Emily to go there for more than a decade because it's exactly like my favorite style, crimpy, just over vertical, steep, long routes. And like even Em was kind of in the mode of like, oh, the road's no good, the camping's no good, the town's too small, it's hard to get groceries, there's no water. And I don't know whether any of that was put out intentionally to minimize the amount of people there, or if those used to be truths. But what we found was like the town is awesome. It's got good coffee. It's got actually this great little bakery. It's got just enough good restaurants. There's great swimming options close to where you camp. The camping down low was actually like really great. So maybe this podcast is going to get dragged by the locals who are trying to keep it quiet. But it shocks me that this place isn't like seeing some of that like 10 sleep July traffic. The place is amazing.
And what is the optimal season if July is maybe like good, but if it's not windy enough, it's too hot? What is kind of like prime time for this location?
I've heard like late August into September is prime, and then it kind of gets too cold.
Yeah.
But I have also heard of climbers going there and climbing some of the hardest routes in July. I think climbing areas kind of come in and out of vogue. And the area was pretty popular around COVID, a little bit before COVID. There was a lot of development. There was a lot of hype around some of the hardest routes getting put up. So I just think it's kind of in a slump period, and everyone's in Wyoming right now. And it'll probably like come back in. It just kind of ebbs and flows in that way.
Absolutely.
Meanwhile, bringing it back to Em, she sent her 20th 514 while we were there. So, yeah. How was the climb, Em?
It was really awesome. I was super excited to climb this route called Vesper that I'd heard of, and it was something I really wanted to try. It's one of the longest routes on the wall. It goes all the way up to the top. And it was put up by my friend Jonathan Segrist, and my friend Tara Kirshner had climbed it, and Paige Clausen. And so I had a lot of really good recommendations, and I was just really stoked to try it. And it turned out that style can also be a little bit hard because the harder routes can be a little bit reachy, just because it's so vertical. In order for it to be hard, the moves tend to be longer, but this actually wasn't the style of that route. And I was just really stoked to like try it, work on it, and be able to send it within a few weeks. That's like a really good kind of like a benchmark show of fitness for me. And this is the second 514 I've done in just a few months. So I'm really happy with my climbing, and I'm really proud of it.
Where are you going to take it? What's next?
I don't know. Well, we have all this movie stuff coming out that we're going to talk about, but I think
she's going to take it on the road to talk about a climb she did 5 years ago.
Yeah. To some climbing gyms around the U.S.
Yeah. No, I think sport climbing is kind of what I want to do this, like for the remainder of the year. We're going to go to the Red River Gorge in October, and like 514 traditionally hasn't been like a kind of like mini project for me, but it kind of feels like I'm at that level right now. So that's really exciting. And I'm kind of excited to go to the Red River Gorge and try some routes around that grade. And then we'll probably do Vegas in November. And with the movie stuff, it's just a lot easier to like go sport climbing and have projects like that. It's a way lower stress. So yeah, I think that's like fitting into our lives right now really well.
Also with a almost 3-year-old, climbing sport crags is much easier than big
sport
walls.
Climbing is a lot easier with a kid, for sure. And it's fun because he gets to come to the crag. He had so much fun. He's starting to get into climbing a little bit. Not climbing, but like
he's getting into swinging.
Hanging on the rope.
Wearing
future
a harness.
Olympic sport, swinging.
There we go.
Yeah, he's good in the harness and he's not afraid. And so that's pretty fun.
And Adrian, did you have a project?
Well, as you know, I was on Everest this spring. And so basically my 6 months prior to that, 4 to 6 months, were really focused on like cardio and backcountry skiing and things like that. Those are all my excuses for why I went into this trip weak. And so I tried to really like have a little bit of a mental shift and want to focus on this trip of gaining fitness, having fun, climbing a lot, and ended up just having a phenomenal trip. I think I sent like 5 different 512s, including a couple of like 12Cs that felt hard for me when I first got on them. So, never spending more than 2 or 3 days on a route, doing a bunch, moving on, and feeling my fitness coming back. It was a rad trip. I was really happy with it. And definitely now sort of feel like in this place where I'd love to try something harder. So I guess the goal for me is kind of maintaining some sort of stasis now over the next couple of months of M's movie stuff that we keep referring to get into this like autumn season and hopefully get to climb something unique.
All right. Right on. Well, sounds like a great trip, and welcome home. It's not bad here in Tahoe either.
Oh, it's amazing here. Best place to be.
Well, let's dive in. Emily, you have a film called Girl Climber, and it was released at Mountain Film in May, I believe. and it's going to be in IMAX theaters around the country on August 24th. Tell us a little bit about the movie and what it's about, and let's dive in.
Yeah. So, yep, the film is called Girl Climber. It's a feature doc. So it's like a real movie, which is pretty exciting and a little bit crazy. And the film is about my life as a climber, centered around this story of trying to free climb a route called the Golden Gate on El Capitan in under 24 hours, which is kind of a feat that's just a pretty rare and difficult thing to do. It took me several years in order to achieve this thing, and a lot of things happened along the way. It was a bit of a roller coaster, and it kind of made for a great story. Thankfully, I had a film crew with me. One of my super close friends, John Glassberg, who really believed in the story, kind of went out on a limb and documented the entire journey. And yeah, it's a really beautiful film. I think it's a nice story. I think it's inspiring, and I think there's a lot of really relatable themes in it. And so that's why it's kind of become a real movie.
It's awesome. I got a chance to see it early on. It's been a little while, so I don't have a full memory of it. Also, my memory right now is absolute garbage.
Yep,
but
understood.
That said, it's a great film. I remember it being awesome, and it's really cool. I think it does a nice job at balancing between a feature doc or like kind of a more relatable story and a climbing film. And so it has some of those core components of a climbing film, great cinematography from the wall, while also telling this story that's about more than just climbing a route or a project or something specific like that. So it's a really nice blend of the two. And I enjoyed, some of those climbing shots are incredible. Obviously, El Cap lends itself to beautiful imagery, yet it told this story that was deeper than just a project.
Yep, exactly. I think that they did a really nice job, and they brought in professionals who weren't climbers to kind of help usher that more human story into it and make it less just a core climbing film.
Absolutely. And so talk a little bit about this project. So Golden Gate, climbing Golden Gate in a day. You were the first female to free climb Golden Gate in under a day. And how did that project come about for you?
Yeah, so for me, I think I was always inspired by El Cap. It was one of the first things that I learned about when I started climbing at age 10. I didn't really understand what it was or what it meant, but I knew about Lynn Hill. I knew Lynn Hill had free climbed El Cap in a day and was the first person to do so. And it was this crazy groundbreaking achievement. And so in my head as a 10-year-old, I was like, oh, wow, that's really amazing that a woman can kind of be at the forefront of this sport. And even though I didn't understand the specifics of what that meant, for me, that was really meaningful. It kind of meant that it was a sport that women could excel at. And that was important to me growing up. Throughout my life as a climber early on, I was really focused on competition climbing and indoor climbing, and then eventually sport climbing outdoors. But it wasn't until my mid-20s that I actually went to Yosemite and put the energy into becoming a good big wall climber. And mixed in with all that was me diversifying my climbing a lot, branching out from competition climbing to outdoor climbing to ice climbing to high altitude climbing to ski mountaineering. So I kind of did a bunch of a variety of disciplines, which I think is pretty unique nowadays. And to me, this achievement of free climbing El Cap in a day is kind of the culmination of all of that experience and all of that diversifying boiled down into this one 24-hour period. So, I had the technical background and strength from competitions and sport climbing to climb hard, but I also had learned how to suffer and sort of endure by being on big, long expeditions and climbing at high altitude and things like that. And so for me, it just felt like this perfect challenge. And I worked at it for several years to get to the point where I felt like I was capable of doing it, and actually took several tries to actually be successful.
And so, oh man, I have multiple questions. I got to take this one direction. I can't. Okay, I'm going to start off. Why Golden Gate? So Golden Gate is one of the routes on El Cap. It certainly is not known as the easiest nor the hardest, but why did you choose Golden Gate?
I chose Golden Gate originally in 2015. It was recommended to me by my friend Hazel Finley, who's another professional climber who had free climbed Golden Gate. It was her first, I believe it was her first route that she did on El Cap, and she did it over like 5 days or something like that. She recommended it to me because she was like, oh, it's got more face climbing, even though it's harder than the free rider. There's not as much off-width climbing, which off-width climbing and the wider climbing is a skill that I didn't really learn. It's a style of climbing I didn't really become very good at ever. And I thought that Golden Gate would kind of just be more my style back then, even though it was a bit harder and it was a bit longer. So originally I climbed that route over 6 days in 2015. And then the idea to do it in a day, I just think it was a cool like show of progression. Like it was very distinct. Instead of picking another route to do in a day, like the easier route, the free rider, I thought that the Golden Gate just, I was drawn to it because I'd already done it over 6 days. And at that point, it was the hardest thing I'd ever done. And I had barely sent it. And I really wanted to progress as a climber. And what a very like straightforward way to show progression than to do the same exact route in under 24 hours this time.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. And I remember hearing about or seeing something about you free climbing Golden Gate over multiple days back in 2015. Was that project and goal for you one of your earlier big wall adventures?
Yeah. So, I mean, because I live in California and I live in Tahoe, Yosemite is actually pretty accessible and pretty easy to get to. I think Adrian and I did a couple like east side missions before that. I climbed around Donner Summit up at Blackwall. We went to the Hulk, stuff like that. But I think, yeah, it was my first real true big wall mission, was kind of like just going up there, me, Adrian, and John. None of us really knew what we were doing. We were all just kind of like trying to figure it out along the way.
Certainly you knew what you were doing for part of what you were doing.
Yes, but the logistics of it. I knew about the climbing, but the rest of it, it's really complicated having a goal like that because there's just so much more experience you need than just being a good rock climber. And I think that's the thing that I learned throughout all of this was it's just the logistics of it, the partnership aspect, the experience with like rope systems and management in that way is a lot. And it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of patience to kind of get to that level.
Yeah, and I think it's easy for people to kind of like miss. Even when you see the trailer for the movie, you'll see like the grade of the climb pop up on the screen, and the grade of Golden Gate is only 513A. And it's like, I think it's really easy for people to see that grade and think like, well, I climbed 13A, you know, like I climbed 13A. And what Em just said, I think is what's the movie does a good job of showing. But to achieve on something like Golden Gate in 24 hours, the grade you climb and the hardest grade of the hardest pitch is such a tiny piece of the accomplishment. It's so much more to do with logistics and fitness and mental like fortitude and all these other things. It has a lot of similarities, I think, to the big mountains and what we talk a lot about on this podcast. And that's kind of been one of the really fun parts is watching Em pull all those skills together and then build a progression to being able to put like big mountain level efforts into very technical rock climbing.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I did like an interview for Climbing Magazine. They were like, what's the number one thing you'd like advice you'd give to people who want to free climb El Cap in a day? And my advice was actually like, get really good at climbing 510, because even if you climb 515, you may not realize that you're not that good at climbing a bunch of 510 repeatedly over hours and hours and hours. And that just beats you down. And yeah, that like ability to climb moderate terrain quickly and efficiently and then be able to climb like a couple 513 pitches at the very end is just a different style of climbing and a different level of fitness than I'd ever experienced in like my competition days or my sport climbing days. So yeah, it was an interesting goal. It was really fun, and I think the film does a good job of explaining that.
Yeah. And so how many attempts and how many years did this project take for you?
Our entire lives.
It wasn't that long. I climbed Golden Gate over 6 days in 2015. And then in 2020, I climbed it in 24 hours. And that was, you know, the attempts I almost think of it as like an ultra marathon, you know, ultra runners, they do like a couple ultra marathons a year. This kind of felt like that for me. It was like each season you have kind of the spring and the fall for the Yosemite season. And each season was maybe 1 or 2 tries per season. But you're kind of going up there, you're practicing the pitches that are giving you trouble. And so you're spending a lot of time in the valley working things, picking a good day to give it the 24-hour attempt. And then if you fail, maybe you get to try again that season, but oftentimes you don't. I think I did it on my 4th attempt, but that was over, years of going to the valley and climbing up there. One year I went and climbed with Alex on the free rider and helped him practice for his free solo. And we did the free rider in a day, and I didn't send, but it was like that was actually when I decided that I wanted to try to do Golden Gate in a day, because I just had the experience of climbing El Cap in a day, even though I didn't send. And I just found it to be like one of the cooler things that I'd ever done.
And so for those that are less familiar, talk about how you can climb El Cap in a day, but not send. What does that look like?
So basically, in order to free climb El Cap in a day, you have to climb all the pitches cleanly without falling. And so if you fall, you have to return back to the beginning of that pitch and climb it cleanly in order to call it a success and then continue on. And so with Alex, he was trying to free solo the route, the free rider. And I went up with him and basically like climbed as much as I could, but we were going really fast. And so if I fell, I just like kept climbing and didn't try to repeat the pitch. And I even like at the end, I was like pulling on gear and like not even like doing all the moves. So I climbed it, but I aided through a lot of sections. So I didn't free climb it, is what it means.
Awesome. And so in your 4 attempts, many years, many days on the route, many times, practicing different pitches, but 4 attempts. One of your attempts went pretty wrong. You had a pretty significant fall. Talk a little bit about what happened there.
Yeah, I think it was my 2nd attempt in 2019 after I came really close to sending, maybe a week or so before that. And it was kind of the last day, like the last day of the season. A big storm was coming. It was end of November. And I really wanted to just try and get it done, I think is what was happening. I just wanted to get it over with. I wanted to send the route and be done with the project. So I was in this really weird mindset of trying to, get it done. I'm not really thinking about the process. And I actually we got up really early in the morning. I was on the first pitch. I was moving super fast, this pitch that I'd climbed a lot, but it was really cold and dark and my toes were really numb and I wasn't placing, Alex and I were getting ready to simul climb. So that means that we're going to climb simultaneously up the first third of the route, which means you're kind of spreading out the gear that you place. It's definitely a more dangerous style of climbing. And so I just wasn't placing much protection and I just slipped. I slipped on the first pitch. I fell maybe 50 feet and it wasn't a clean fall because it's not like super steep at that part of the wall. So I hit some things on the way down. I hit a ledge. I flipped upside down. I lost consciousness. It was a bad accident and it was really scary. And full rescue, hospital, everything. We thought maybe I had a spinal cord injury. So it was very, very traumatic. That said, I got really lucky and I walked out of the hospital that day with like a concussion and some bumps and bruises. And, it looked
pretty
bad.
Gnarly rope rash.
Yeah, it looked really bad. But it, all things considering, I was actually fine. And I got lucky. I got really lucky, I think. And I think I learned a lot from that experience about like my level of risk and how I want to climb that route. People ask me all the time if I wanted to quit after that. I didn't really think about quitting because I felt like I had made a lot of mistakes and I felt like everything that had happened could be prevented in the future. So it wasn't just like this random occurrence like rockfall or avalanche or something like that can happen. That can kind of cause you to rethink whether or not the goal is worth it. For me, I was like, oh, I just made a bunch of mistakes. And I learned a bunch, and now I can move forward and change all of that and be much safer.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Alpenglow Expeditions, a Tahoe-based guide company with an international reputation. In its 20th year of operations, Alpenglow leads the highest quality expeditions in some of the world's greatest mountain ranges, from California's High Sierra to the rugged Himalaya. Alpenglow runs more than 40 international expeditions per year, as well as offering a full menu of guided ski and climbing courses throughout California. Join us and experience the Alpenglow difference.
One of the things I think the film did an amazing job at is showing some of your emotions around this multi-year project. Certainly the fall, the accident created some of that or contributed, but a multi-year project like this brings out emotion in people, and the film did a great job at showing that and showing how you deal with that and how that's a real factor and component. I thought it was very honest and real and admirable for you to let a cameraman or camerawoman see those moments where you are struggling with some of the emotions around it. Tell us a little bit about how those emotions play into the climb and into the project and how you handle those emotions.
Yeah, it's funny because people are always like, how did it feel to be super vulnerable and open on the camera, in front of the camera and stuff like that? And it's interesting because I think I'm just so used to being filmed, and John and I had been through so much. And when this person who you trust so much and you've done so much with is holding a camera in front of your face while you're climbing or while you're expressing emotions or while you're going through something, it's not like you think in your head like, oh my God, well, like this might be a feature documentary someday that might be on an IMAX screen and people are going to see me crying. Like that thought never occurs to you, like I had no idea what was going to happen with this footage. And I was just kind of going through the experience how I would and any experience, whether there was a camera there or not. In fact, sometimes I kind of like having people there that I trust, whether or not they have a camera. Like it's just kind of comforting for me. And so I was just doing my normal thing, like having the feelings and expressing them and trying to get through them and trying to work through it. And I think it did come across as pretty vulnerable and pretty raw, just because free climbing on El Cap is really hard. I think a lot of people go through the same feelings that I go through, with the exception of maybe someone like Alex or Tommy. And so I just think it's a cool glimpse into what climbers go through up there. Like, I don't think it's unique. And I think that's why the movie is so relatable. And I think that's why hopefully people draw some inspiration from it, is because I struggle just as much as everyone else does with trying to do hard things. Like, I'm afraid, I get frustrated, I get, upset and angry at myself. And I show all that. And I think that I'm proud of that, but also I feel like it's really normal. So yeah, I don't know. I think that the film is maybe more relatable in some ways than a film like Free Solo or Dawnwall, just because those guys do come across as pretty superhuman. And I think that I don't at all.
I think you're right. And I think that the emotions are not the part that's unique, but it's the emotions on IMAX big screen that maybe are. That's going to be cool. I think it is cool because it is relatable. I think it's cool because you were vulnerable and let people into those emotions, versus keeping them for yourself. So yeah, I think it was cool to see that factor because it's real and it's part of climbing big walls, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have anything to add?
No, come on. I'm not being interviewed here. I know. I just can't get this mic.
I actually have questions for you, Adrian.
Come on, I'm the host, not the guest. No, I think that is an interesting point. We keep referring to Alex and Tommy. Obviously, all our listeners know who that is. As far as I know, those are kind of the two main rock climbing films that have made it to kind of like the mainstream through a theatrical release would be Free Solo and Dawnwall. And if you open that up to a wider like climbing in general, maybe you'd add like The Alpinist about Marc-Andre Leclerc and Meru, all the way back to Meru sort of being the first film that theatrical release, mainstream kind of like exposure. This one, is it the first climbing movie kind of that does focus on a woman? And if it is, was that important to you in the process? And can you speak a little bit more to like more about how it feels different to you? You've obviously seen all these films and been inspired by these films.
Yeah, as far as I know, I think it's like the first female forward focused story in terms of rock climbing. Like, I think mountaineering and alpinism, there might be a couple of female stories out there. But yeah, I think it was important for me to tell that story. And I hope it kind of opens the doors for more female stories in climbing. Because I think the way we experience climbing is quite a bit different than men. And it's just nice to be able to show that. And it's nice for young girls and women to be able to see that. The film also touches a lot on like the mentorship side and the motherhood side of things, which is a a transition that female athletes go through that is just very different than their, male peers. And so I think it was an important story to be told. I think it was it was really important for me to be honest and vulnerable about that process. And I just hope it is just the beginning in a lot of ways.
I think too, there's a layer of giving back, and that, Lynn Hill was one of your early inspirations in your climbing life. And you even spoke about her when you were 10 years old, and that you associated Lynn Hill with LCAP, and that kind of created this idea in your head early on. And in a way, by creating this film, you're kind of giving back to that inspiration that drove you for many, many years. And hopefully that will drive another young girl to be a, incredible climber that free climbs Golden Gate in 12 hours or something cool.
Or flashes it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dawn wall in 24 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. It is a good point. And then the film also, heavily features Hillary Nelson and my relationship with her and the mentorship that I received from her, and sort of like finding my own way and in climbing and finding my path. And obviously she was a huge inspiration and like direct like mentor of mine for many, many years. And I think that side of the story is also like very human and very real, and a very powerful part of my story in the film.
Absolutely. Yeah. The relationship that you had with Hillary is very well covered in the film, although short in the film. It doesn't have a whole ton of footage, but you can just feel the power of that relationship through the film for sure.
And one of the themes, you just mentioned it, but one of the themes that really comes out in the film is this kind of like stress between your professional climbing career and the goals you want to accomplish, and how hard they are and how long they might take, and this path that Hillary was an example of, potentially becoming a mother, having a family with me, Did that feel very real throughout those years? Or was it something that you realized afterwards that like stress was so poignant and so obvious?
I think towards the end, it started to feel more urgent. Like I remember having to talk to my like sports psychologist about like the ticking clock of like, I have this clock and it's this like, figurative clock, and it's ticking in my head of like, this is the countdown before you have to like decide if you want to have kids and when you want to have kids. And there is like a timeline that I think a lot of women feel, especially female athletes. And so for me, at the end there, it was definitely like, I mean, you and I had a lot of conversations about this. I think 2019, 2020, around that period of time, like, okay, like when are we going to do this? Kind of like, it's kind of a now or never thing, or it's like, in the next few years. And that is a stress that you start to feel as a woman. I think there is like always this kind of like part of your brain that wants that, but doesn't want it, but wishes. There's a little bit of resentment too, because it's like, oh, if I was a guy, I could have like 10 more years, but I really can't do that. I really can't afford to take that time, even though I'm not totally ready. So yeah, it was always a stress. And I think that was a very like valid stress to have, even looking back on it in hindsight. Yeah.
And so do you feel it's always hard to ask for advice or learnings, but like, is there anything you would have done differently looking back at it now, or anything you'd like advise or suggest as women watching this film? Like you said, it's especially poignant for an athlete, of course, but it's so true with careers in so many different ways, that like stress or almost conflict between these two goals. Like, what do you think?
I don't think there's an easy, like, straightforward solution or piece of advice to give for something like that. Like, it would be easy. I wish I could just say like, oh yeah, like, it's totally fine. Just have a kid. You'll come back. You'll be the same. It's all going to work out. Like, nothing's going to change. I was pretty adamant that I wasn't going to change after I had a kid, and that my risk tolerance was going to be the same, and I was going to keep doing all the things that I wanted to do, and I was going to go back and climb on LCAP, and I was going to ski rad things and go on expeditions and all that stuff. And I was really afraid of that changing and shifting. And then it definitely did in all of the ways. And I'm really content with it. So I think my advice would be like, if you really want to have a family, if you really want to have a baby and have that be an experience for you and your partner, or maybe not if you don't have a partner. Like, I think it's such a worthy and valuable experience, but it will change things. And you'd be surprised how at peace you can be with that. Like, I did change, I have changed, and I was so afraid of that happening, but there are zero regrets I have about it. Like, it's almost like liberating in a way. You're like, oh, I don't really have to like feel that pressure anymore, because there are some things that just aren't worth it to me anymore. And I just feel so content with that.
So for those that aren't as familiar, since you successfully climbed El Cap, you had a child, Arrow, who was born in 2023?
Late 2022.
Late 2022. He's almost 3. And so I think there's 2 sides to it. There's the physical component, and then there's the mental component of having a child and having these challenging goals like climbing El Cap in a day. So let's start off with the physical side. Obviously, being pregnant for 9 months and then having a child takes a toll on your body.
Yeah.
How do you feel now about the physical aspect of having Arrow? And do you think that like the goal of climbing El Cap again in 24 hours is feasible for you?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, first of all, I say it's like a 2-year body sacrifice. Like, it's 2 years, like between like getting pregnant, dealing with all that, and then giving birth, and then breastfeeding, all in. Like, you're 2 years in with all of that, and then give or take, it takes some time, and everybody's different, obviously. So yeah, for me, it felt like a 2-year commitment. And now physically, I actually feel quite good. I feel quite strong. I climb just as hard, like sport climbing and in the gym. If not, I'm a little bit stronger, I would say, in a lot of ways, because I'm like that much more disciplined and focused. And like when it's time for me to climb, I just sort of cherish it a little bit more. And I think that helps me try harder. I think it helps me focus. And so I've been really pleasantly surprised with like physically how good I feel, and how thankfully, because we do have resources and we have childcare, like I'm able to like put time into my climbing and training. So that's felt quite good. I don't know. I think free climbing El Cap in a day is probably feasible if I really wanted to. I think there's like a motivation piece and a desire piece that's a little bit trickier.
Yeah.
Like advice for people, I would be like, yeah, you don't have to like completely give up everything that you love doing when you have a kid, but you're definitely making sacrifices. And when I go to Yosemite now and drive into the valley and look up at El Cap and realize, like, think about like the time and the commitment and the energy that I poured into that goal, I'm not sure I have that drive anymore. I think there's a part of me that gets just as much satisfaction out of like climbing a route that's like on a smaller wall that doesn't take quite as much commitment and time and energy. And then I can allocate some of that time and energy to spending time with my family. And for me, that's just like a really good balance right now. So yeah, feasible, sure. But do I have the energy and the drive? Honestly, maybe not anymore. But we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting. And so there's the physical side, and that seems to be a non-issue for you. Pretty cool that you're feeling stronger than before. I think like for those parents out there, like your efficiency around your free time is so much greater. You're like, okay, I have an hour. I need to maximize this free hour that I have. And so it sounds like you've really used that opportunity. And then there's the mental side. And I think on the mental side, there's all sorts of factors, right? But as you were just talking about, the kind of motivation and drive, there's the risk tolerance. Do you feel like your risk tolerance has changed?
Yeah, massively. Yeah, I'm just like not interested in doing things that are like, dangerous or hard, what I would consider to be like too dangerous or too difficult, or too much time away. There's a lot of factors that go into it. But I listened to like I think it was a Cody Townsend, like Climbing Gold or something. And he said something about like, yeah, sure, there's things that I could do that maybe like 10 years ago, I would have felt like that experience was worth the risk. And now the value of that experience just isn't there anymore. Like the value of doing something that I perceive as like, on the edge of my risk tolerance, I don't know. Like I think about it and I'm like, sure, I could do that, but I don't know if I'm going to get out of it, enough value that's going to like outweigh the value of like the risk that I would be taking.
And, in the mountains and in mountain careers, a lot of times we talk about objective risks or risks out there that we can't control, objective hazards, things like rockfall, things like avalanches to a degree, Serac fall. Do you think that the objective risks are what you're less comfortable with, or is it risks that are your, skill and fitness and awareness as well? Like, I think a lot of times mental capacity is strained by having a child. And I'm curious if are you shying away from those objective risks or objective hazards, or are you shying away from hazards that you have control over? You just don't have the same mental capacity as you did prior.
I think it's both. Yeah, I think it's both. I mean, obviously, we still go out into the mountains. We still take risk, objective risk, because it's always going to exist. And, it wouldn't be what it is without it. I just think we're on the side of taking less risk when it comes to those objective hazards. But we still take those risks because, to some extent, it is worth it for me. But yeah, I think the ones that are within my control, like going and doing something that, something in trad climbing or big wall climbing, where it may not have a lot of objective hazard, but it requires so much brain space and so much fear management that I just don't have right now. And it's gotten better. Right after Arrow was born, it was really hard for me to even be in Yosemite because I just couldn't mentally handle the stress and the anxiety around it. And over the years, that's changed a little bit. I think I have a little bit higher capacity for it now. But yeah, it's a good question. It's one I never really thought of. But yeah, I think I don't have the capacity anymore to put myself in those situations that are scary or, where I'm just kind of on the edge of my mental abilities. Yeah. But it does change. It's kind of it ebbs and flows.
I think about it a lot because I think that my risk tolerance around objective hazards hasn't really changed that much. My desire to, not be destroyed by rockfall or an avalanche or serac or something is pretty much equal. But for me, it's more about those risks that are associated with your mental bandwidth or your physical bandwidth or your focus, that I have just less capacity, and therefore the risks I'm willing to take are diminished as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I agree with that. But also, if, and it has to do with going away on expeditions too. For instance, I've always dreamed of going to Pakistan and climbing a big alpine wall there, where there is a lot of objective hazard, rockfall, and it can be quite dangerous. But then there's also the time side, and I'm
hazard.
I'm just I don't think I'm in a place where I want to take 6 weeks away and go to a place that's dangerous and has objective hazard, and it all just kind of piles on top of itself, and it's just oh, that's just not an experience I need to have right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and it'll be interesting to see how that changes as Arrow gets older and has more of his own
Stops
interests.
talking to us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When he's psyched to go off to camp for a month, maybe you'll want to go to Pakistan. Awesome. And Adrian, you are obviously Emily's life partner, but also were a partner in her climb on Golden Gate. How does this film impact you, and how do you feel about it? Does it bring you some pride to, see the support that you gave for so many years on the big screen?
I mean, of course, I feel so much pride for what Emily really created. And I think one of the cool things about the film is it really shows the team Em built around her. And I'm very clear that, of course, I'm an important part of that team. And the film does a great job of showing me, and I'm really proud of that. But the key is that it wasn't just me, and it wasn't just Alex, and it wasn't just John the filmer, and it wasn't just Hillary. It was Emily figuring out that to achieve at her total top level took asking for help and pieces from many different people, and deep relationships with those. That give and take is positive for both people, that ultimately, it all formed around allowing for this peak achievement. And that's what I think, having watched the film now a few times, keeps coming back to me, is that rock climbing and free climbing, Emily is the only person who free climbed Golden Gate in a day, but it was 100% a team sport, and that comes through so powerfully. I don't know whether that was a plan throughout the process or throughout the film, but when did it become so clear that the team was a big part of making this possible?
I think it just sort of evolved in that way. I mean, big wall free climbing can be perceived as this very individual sport by, the outside. But I think once you kind of dive into it and start doing it, you recognize how important that partnership aspect is. And that's something that we talk about a lot. Like when you want to go climb on El Cap, it's like you just need a partner who's going to be there for you, who has the experience, who has the same risk tolerance as you. It's just like the partnership aspect with mountain stuff is so, so important. I think we all know that. And then especially with something like this objective, like there's just so few people that can support you in that way. And so I think it just naturally evolved into like having to be really thoughtful about who the team was. And then if you add on the film aspect, I mean, for a filmer to be able to be up there, to be in the right place, to hold all the camera gear, like all of that is just so complex. And it just requires a very like specific set of skills. And it took that long to kind of like assemble that team, I would say, in order to be successful. And yeah, I just think it evolves over time once you kind of like dig into a project like that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because at its core, climbing is a team sport, even though we don't think of it that way. Like, unless you're Alex, you need a belayer if you want to go climbing. Even if you're bouldering, you typically want to have someone kind of there spotting you. And so climbing is more of a team sport than we might think about it as. And for you, Emily, this team wasn't just one partner. It had to be more robust. In the end, you had, both Alex and Adrian supporting you as your climbing partner on the wall. At what point do you feel like you had the team dialed?
I mean, I think we didn't figure out that little detail until the last attempt. And yeah, the idea was that like Alex is really fast and competent, but he's like maybe not like the most patient person.
Emotionally sensitive.
Yeah. I mean, and he's gotten to his credit, he's gotten a lot better. He is quite good, actually. He's a good supporter.
Maybe he has just as much emotional capacity. It's just a different style of delivery.
Yeah, different style. And also, like, I had asked him so many times to support me up there. Like, it kind of worked out better for everyone, for him to, like, go have a fun day and climb on the easy pitches with me, simul climbing, and then all the way up to where the hard climbing started. And then for Adrian to take over when it got really difficult and, like, kind of had to auger in and go into the second night. And he could like go home and hang out with Sonny and go out to dinner or whatever, Yeah, so I think that idea came together at the end. And now it's funny because Alex does that first, like, I think he did it for Jordan as well. When Jordan free climbed Golden Gate in a day, Jordan Cannon, like Alex just did like the free blast part, like the
he's
free
an
blast
opener, but you still need
he's
a
just like,
exactly. You need a closer.
He's not a closer. He's just like, I'll do the, like, for him, it's like a very casual, like fun day out to do that part and to offer that to his friends. And he's one of the only people that can do it at that level and at that speed. So I thought it was a really creative and cool solution.
That's cool to hear.
Yeah, this was a really unique solution. And there are all these fun things in the film of like unique solutions that you came up with to kind of like make this climb more theoretically possible for you. But just kind of like rounding out the partner piece, I think it's underappreciated. And I think maybe this story kind of tells a little bit of it. But within the professional like climber skier world that we spend a lot of time in and are so lucky to have so many great people around Tahoe in, probably the biggest complaint's the wrong word, challenge I hear from athletes is finding partners for their biggest objectives. And that includes like, trying to ski 8,000 meter peaks, me or Jimmo or, other people doing that. Topo trying to climb new routes on 8,000 meter peaks. Emily and other climbers I know trying to like auger in on a project on El Cap where it's not just one attempt or one day or even 3 days or 5 days. It's a season on one route. And the challenge of finding someone that aligns with the same goal, the same schedule, similar strength and ability, an emotional compatibility. I think it's way harder than having like strong fingers or great uphill fitness in your legs or all the other things we as athletes kind of like work on. Or it might even be easier than like finding the dollars for an expedition. Like it's easier to find dollars than it is to find the right partner. And I think it's a story we could all speak more about because I don't think it's a negative challenge. It's just an interesting piece. And for me over a long career now, realizing that like so much of my achievement couldn't have happened without aligning it with the right partner at the right time. And that's an equally important part of a professional athletic career is investing in relationships that ultimately potentially become great partners for big dreams.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think it's because these goals are so complex, right? It's not like you're trying to like break a world record in a swimming pool. It requires a lot of logistics, and it requires like a lot of travel and a lot of like existing on the edge of the earth in a lot of ways. And so there's only a certain number of people that can do that. And it requires a lot of teamwork. And it is something that's not often talked about. And I think the film does do a good job of highlighting it.
It's so wild to think that like the ideal partner is not necessarily the most compatible from a skill standpoint, you know, and it's more about all the other components that a partner can bring.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. And sometimes you need more than one.
There you go.
Em's building her ideal partner.
Yeah.
It just took a few of us.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, great film. I really enjoyed watching it, and I certainly want to check it out again when it comes out in theaters. IMAX, August 24th, and then select theaters around the country after that for some period of time. And then it will be streaming one day.
Yeah, so that's August 24th, IMAX release nationwide, and then wider theatrical release for anywhere from like a week to 90 days. And that is actually like domestic and some international as well. And then eventually, like most movies, it'll go to a streamer at some point.
I'm sure, you hear this a lot of movies like this is a film that should be seen on a big screen, but it just is true. Like, I hope a lot of people got to see Free Solo or Dawnwall on a big screen, so people have seen El Cap before. But John Glassberg and his latter 11 crew, John essentially spent, 2012 to 2022, like a decade of his life with a camera, with M all over the world, but especially on El Cap and in Yosemite. And the visuals that he was able to capture as one of the best filmers on the planet for that style of filming, it is unreal. And I had seen the film maybe 6 times on a small screen, including we did a screening at Everest Base Camp at 18,000 feet on a tiny little laptop that kept glitching. And then I saw it for the first time at the Newport Film Festival on a big screen. And it was just an entirely different experience. So for people who can find a way to get to a theater, especially with IMAX, I can't recommend it too highly. August 24th.
Well, Emily, thanks so much for sharing your story in Girl Climber. It was a great film, and we want to hear, it's the Duffle Shuffle podcast. We want to hear what's that item that's going in your bag every single time you go on this film tour.
Oh, on the film tour?
Yeah, climbing we don't care about. Oh. For your film tour, like what comes with you? What's the most important thing?
I bring a pair of climbing shoes and I find a climbing gym nearby. That's like the hack for all film tours and when you travel and have to do things. I look up the closest climbing gym and I always bring a pair of climbing shoes in my
Okay,
carry-on.
so when you go to an unknown gym, what's the climbing shoe that you're bringing?
I bring the La Sportiva Andra Comp shoe.
All right.
That's my go-to right now.
That's your go-to.
New. It's new. I don't even know if they're out yet.
Wow.
Breaking secrets.
Yeah, I hit up climbing gyms. I love going to climbing gyms. It's like one of my favorite things. It's like when I travel and I look up the gym, see if they have like any sort of board. And if not, that's still okay. And I go and get a little session in probably before the film premiere.
I agree. And I'm not a hard climber like you, but it is fun to go to climbing gyms. And I've really enjoyed it around the world because you get to like experience the same culture that you're used to in a different culture.
Exactly.
And it really is a cool way to like explore a city is like check out their local climbing gym.
Yep.
And, in Ecuador, in Quito, there's like these outdoor walls. And in France, there's like this tiny tower. And so a cool way to explore the world.
Yep.
Through climbing gyms.
Yeah, totally agree. It's a good point.
Awesome. Well, hopefully you guys enjoy some Tahoe time. Welcome home, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Good luck on the tour.
Thanks for listening to the Duffle Shuffle podcast. You can follow along on Instagram, where we post our favorite clips from each episode, as well as more about the world of climbing, skiing, and mountaineering. If you haven't already, please subscribe, rate us, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Catch you next time, and until then, we hope you enjoy some time outside.